So let's talk about the American fridge freezer. It's another one of those things that I get asked for over and over again when it comes time to design a kitchen for my client. And I ask them, the question is like, is there anything that I must include in this kitchen design? Is more often than not, it's yes, we would like an American fridge freezer. So I know this will probably be unpopular for people that love American fridge freezers, but I am so not a fan because I think what happens with American fridge freezers is that they've just become this kind of obvious choice. They're kind of something that we default to without perhaps really thinking about it. So I gently try to suggest that if I can come up with another suggestion that might be better than American fridge freezer, would you be open to hearing that? And thankfully, most people are, yes, absolutely, I'd be very open to it. So brilliant. So then we have an opportunity to explore the world beyond the American fridge freezer. So I suppose one of the first things that I don't like about American fridge freezers is they just take up so much space. Yeah. And I suppose that's what's amazing about them, their boldness and their size and the sort of generosity that may indicate. But in a kind of townhouse kitchen, in a non-large kitchen, oh my God, they're massive. Yeah. So the main issue is not so much the width, because they are obviously much wider than a standard fridge freezer, but it's the depth of them. Most kitchen units and most appliances are a standard 600 deep. So an American fridge freezer is often way more than that, often like over 700 deep. And you've got these big doors that you need to think about, and you've also got clearance for when the doors open, and they're often big chunky doors, and they fold back, and we have to think about, well, where are they folding back to? And so you've just got this big thing that doesn't quite fit with all the other things in the kitchen. Now that is brilliant if you've got, say, an American kitchen in a very large American house. And we've all seen American fridge freezers in those big American kitchens where there's lots of space. Maybe there's a double island, there's a pantry room, and they look amazing because they've got space to breathe, because they are visually very dominant. But then you take that idea and you take it into a different context. You take it into a kitchen of maybe like a Victorian terrace or a 1930s semi-detached here in the UK, and all of a sudden we're trying to squeeze in something that wasn't really designed for those spaces. So that can be a real issue. So we've got the problem of the physical size of the American fridge freezer, and just the kind of the aesthetic weight, just how big and dominant they are in the room. So both of those things immediately raise alarm bells with me when I'm designing a kitchen, and think this is, as a kind of default choice, this is often not the best choice for people to be making. Another reason I'm not a great fan is that when American fridge freezers started out and we all started to see them, we saw these beautiful models. We saw the Sub-Zero American fridge freezers and the very industrial, pure design, and they looked amazing. And what's happened is, and this happens with everything really, is that design was used as influence, and then it got watered down and watered down and watered down until we see the kind of American fridge freezers that we see now, where we can buy at B&Q and Curry's and those types of places, and they're kind of like distant cousins of those amazing machines that they started out as. And so I just think that a lot of American fridge freezers are just not that attractive. I don't think they've got a lot going for them. And then the worst thing for me is when we've got these kind of like inserts in them, and there's the drink dispenser or the ice maker, or the one that I really struggle with have you seen the ones, and they've got the big screens, and that's where you're supposed to like keep an inventory of what's in your fridge, or maybe surf the internet. Now, I can't for the life of me imagine what kitchen those are going to look good in. Maybe some kind of bachelor tech guy, but even then, oh, I struggle. I struggle. If you can think of a kitchen where one of those would look good, maybe it's your kitchen. Like, tell me, like, please tell me. I am very, very open to being wrong about this stuff. So if you feel like you'd like to tell me an opposite view, please do so in the comments. I would love to hear it. So I personally don't like the idea of all this kind of tech being put in the front of the fridge and all these kind of things that then need to be cleaned and just disrupt the sort of purity of it. And people say to me, oh, I couldn't live without my cold water dispenser. And I often say, well, there's other ways to get cold water. So, you know, often on boiling water taps these days, you can get all sorts of different water options, including chilled. So there may be a better way to get that functionality than whacking it on the front of your fridge. So maybe this brings up another thing, which I don't think we think about enough when we are designing our kitchens. What I like to call it is the appliance aesthetic. I think we should consciously choose our appliance aesthetic. And so if we consciously choose to go down a big industrial machine aesthetic with our fridge freezer, I think we should be matching that, and we should be having a big industrial chunky hob and possibly a big chunky exposed dishwasher in stainless steel as well. And all of those things should match. Yeah. So for an example, in my kitchen, I'm going for quite a minimalist look. So my appliance aesthetic is hidden or invisible. It's going to be an off-white worktop. So I'm going for a minimal white hob, which will disappear. I'm going for a white sink. I'm hiding my oven behind doors in the pantry. And I know people will scream at that and go, oh my God, that's so impractical. You can't do that. You can't do that. How awful. But for me, it's a step up from no oven at all, which I was seriously considering because I just don't use an oven. I may still just put in a slot for an oven and think that people could put that in later, but I don't want an oven on display. And I think that's part of the issue with the American fridge freezer. Often it's just like one element out on its own and it kind of just floats and fights with the rest of the kitchen. So if you're going to do it properly and follow that through with all of your other appliances. So a lot of people would defend the American fridge freezer saying, well, we need a lot of storage. You know, we've got a big family and we need lots of refrigeration and freezing. But I would say they're actually not that great for storage. There's better ways to get more storage, more fridge storage, more freezer storage than the American fridge freezer. And one of the worst things is when you've got the traditional type American fridge freezer where you've got a slither of freezer and then you've got a slither of fridge, and you just don't get that kind of that width and that generosity. There's a lot of kind of chunkiness that's taken up in non-storage kind of design. So just check if you're going down that path, just make sure that they're actually going to give you the storage that you're expecting, because they're not actually automatically that wonderful. A better design for an American fridge freezer is the French door fridge freezer. So one of the great things about that is they had the drawers at the bottom for the freezer, and then they had the lovely French doors. So you had this nice wide view. And I would say if I was ever going to get an American fridge freezer, that would be the one I would choose, because you've got this lovely width, this generosity of width, and you've got the fridge at eye height, which is most important. So just think about storage, think about the dimensions of the storage and how you're going to use it. So you might be thinking, well, if I'm not a great fan of the American fridge freezer, what am I a fan of? To me, I think the most elegant and practical solution in most kitchens is the integrated fridge freezer. And what I love about that is that you can hide away the functionality of the fridge freezer behind the cabinetry doors, and it can just blend beautifully into the rest of the kitchen. So your eye isn't being taken away by the appliance. And like I've said before, if you want the appliances to make a statement, that's great. But a lot of the time we don't. We just want a space that feels calm, especially when we have dining areas and kitchens open to each other. I think we want more and more of a calm space where we can relax and we're not always getting kitchen, kitchen, kitchen cues. And also, when we integrate our fridge and freezer, what that means is that we can be a little bit more flexible about where they go. Now, I know with the fridge, it needs to be in the working triangle. So that's very important. It's in that working place in the kitchen. But the trick is when you separate the fridge and the freezer, then you can put the freezer in a secondary position because we're not constantly reaching into the freezer unless you're like me, going for my Magnum every night. But, it's not the same as going to the fridge. So we can think, great, we've got this big chunk of freezer, we can put it somewhere else. So depending on the way you use your kitchen and depending on how often you use frozen goods, you might choose to put that just in a secondary spot in the kitchen, or you might decide to put it in the utility room or in the pantry, or some people even put a freezer in the garage. So that's really up to you, but it just means that you can have your fridge in prime position without also having to have your freezer in prime position. And if you separate those two appliances, then you can also choose exactly how much space you want for them. So what I love to do is I love to have a full, high, tall larder fridge. So that's the full height ones, full width, and then you've got stacks of fridge storage. And then with the freezer, you can either do the same, so you've got masses of freezer storage, or you could just have a little freezer under the worktop, which might work better for you. And of course, you can always add extra units if you want as well. So one family might want to have a tall fridge and a secondary fridge under the worktop. It just depends really how you eat and what kind of things you need to keep cold and frozen. So I love an integrated fridge freezer, and I also love separating those two elements out. Now, all of that said, there are exceptions, and I think sometimes having your appliances on display and very honest about what they are is a great thing to do. But I just want people to do that consciously rather than by default. Now, another thing that came up the other day when I had a client is she came to me and she said, the important thing in this kitchen design is our collection of fridge magnets. And she had a big American fridge freezer and it was covered in fridge magnets. She said to me that she'd mentioned it to the architect that she wanted the fridge magnet collection to be in the kitchen, and he nearly fainted. Which was good for me because then she called me and she said, look, I don't think the architect really gets what we're going for. We want a kitchen that is us and that has personality in it, and we don't want our personality and our history stripped out of this kitchen just for the sake of a grand design statement. And I was like, totally understand. So one option is we keep the American fridge freezer and we make that work in the kitchen. But another option would be to integrate the fridge freezer and separate them and do all those lovely things that we can do. And then we're looking at some options where we can create a really specific and intentional stainless steel piece of wall where we can start to play around with the fridge magnets. And that's sort of like decoupling fridge magnets away from the fridge. I thought it's really, really interesting. So it just reminds me that sometimes the constraints we have, or the things that lead us to believe that we need to have certain things, for example, I have a collection of fridge magnets, therefore I need a metallic fridge to stick them on. Those things can be challenged and we can come up with other creative and interesting ideas. Now, I don't know with this particular client if she's going to retain the American fridge freezer or if she's going to go for the feature steel wall. But whatever she does, at least we've explored those options. And I suppose that's why I make this content. One of the things I really want people to do is I want people to explore options, and rather than just settle on the obvious thing, oh, I need a kitchen island, or oh, I need an American fridge freezer because that's just kind of what we do. I like to challenge people and say, yeah, but what else could we do? Let's take a look at some other options first. There is absolutely no right nor wrong. Everybody's different, but let's just like choose from a place of being informed and having explored those options. And I think that's a great thing to do when it comes to designing your home. Now, I'm sure I have missed out some of the great points about American fridge freezers, and I may have also missed out some of the problems with American fridge freezers. Oh, here's another one. You have to plumb them in if they've got the water dispenser, so that could be an extra kind of issue when it comes to renovating your kitchen. There's an extra one, but I'm sure there's more. I'm sure there's more, and I would love to hear in the comments any more that I may have missed. I'd love to hear if you're in love with your American fridge freezer, or if you have left that behind and you have moved to the world of integrated, and have you separated your fridge from your freezer? What are some interesting places where you have now placed your freezer? I'd be very interested to hear. So here's to having more informed and creative choices for our kitchens.